The annual village festival in Ukerewe, Tanzania, was the most anticipated event of the year. Bright colours, lively drums, and a sea of joyous faces filled the air with celebration. Joseph, a young fisherman, had no intention of attending until his friends insisted he take a break from his solitary life. As he wandered through the crowd, his gaze fell upon a beautiful woman standing alone by a lantern-lit stall. Her name was Amina. Joseph was drawn to her immediately. Her presence felt almost magical, as though she didn't quite belong. As they talked, Amina's soft voice lulled Joseph into a trance. She spoke little of herself, yet he felt a deep connection, something he had never experienced before. By the end of the night, he found himself completely captivated. Amina seemed to appear and disappear like mist, yet her smile was unforgettable. By the time the festival ended, Joseph couldn't imagine his life without her. Little did he know their encounter was about to lead him into a world he could never have imagined. Over the next few days, Joseph couldn't stop thinking about Amina. It was as if she had cast a spell on him and he was powerless to resist. He sought her out, and when he found her again by the lakeside, his heart raced. Amina's beauty was otherworldly, her movements graceful and serene. Before long, he asked her the question that had been on his mind since the night they met. "Amina, will you marry me?" he asked, almost breathlessly. To his surprise, she agreed without hesitation. Joseph was overjoyed, but confused by how quickly things were progressing. He didn't care. His love for her was all-consuming, and he couldn't bear the thought of losing her. A week later, they were married in a small, intimate ceremony. Though Amina had no family to invite, she didn't seem troubled by it. Her mysterious aura only added to her charm, and Joseph felt like the luckiest man in the world. However, from the very first night in their new home, strange things began to happen. On their wedding night, Joseph awoke to the sound of whispers. At first he thought it was a dream, but when the voices grew louder, he sat up in bed. The room was cold, far colder than it should have been in the Tanzanian heat. He glanced over at Amina, who was lying peacefully beside him, her chest rising and falling with each breath. The whispers seemed to echo from the walls like distant voices trying to communicate with him. He tried to ignore them, assuming it was just his imagination. However, as the nights passed, the whispers continued, and soon they were accompanied by strange shadows flitting across the room. Joseph tried to dismiss his growing unease, convincing himself it was just the excitement of the wedding and adjusting to married life. But deep down, a gnawing fear began to take root. What was happening in their home, and why did it feel like something or someone was watching them? One afternoon, Joseph returned home from the lake with a fresh catch of fish, eager to see Amina. But as he entered the house, he found her standing in the centre of the room, staring blankly at the floor. Her eyes were vacant, and her skin looked pale, almost translucent. "Amina?" Joseph called out, but she didn't respond. He rushed to her side, shaking her gently until she blinked and looked up at him, confusion in her eyes. "What happened?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Amina simply smiled, brushing off his worries. "I was just lost in thought," she said softly, but Joseph couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That night the whispers returned, louder than ever before, and this time Joseph swore he heard Amina's name among them. Joseph couldn't ignore the strangeness any longer. He loved Amina, but there was something unsettling about the way she seemed to drift in and out of his life, like a shadow. Whenever he asked her about her past, she evaded his questions. She had no family, no friends, and no history that he could uncover. Determined to understand his wife's mysterious behaviour, Joseph decided to ask the villagers if anyone knew more about her. When he mentioned her name, the villagers fell silent. A few glanced at each other nervously, and one elderly woman shook her head. "Amina, "Are you sure that's her name?" she asked cautiously. Joseph nodded. The woman's eyes darkened as she spoke. "There was an Amina, but she died many years ago. She was a young woman, beautiful like you say, but she drowned in the lake. Her body was never found." Joseph's blood ran cold. Was it possible? Had he married a ghost? Joseph rushed home, his mind spinning. He couldn't believe what the old woman had said, but at the same time everything about Amina suddenly seemed suspicious. He found her sitting by the window, staring out at the lake with that same distant look in her eyes. Gathering his courage, he approached her. "Amina, I need to know the truth," he said, his voice trembling. "Who are you? Where did you come from?" Amina turned slowly to face him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment she said nothing, then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, she finally spoke. "Joseph, I never meant to deceive you," she began softly. "But the truth is, I'm not like other women. I have a past that stretches beyond this life." Joseph's heart pounded in his chest as Amina's words confirmed his worst fears. Amina's confession came slowly, each word heavy with sorrow. She revealed that she had died many years ago, on the very night she was supposed to marry another man. Tragedy had struck during a storm, and she had drowned in the lake. While waiting for her groom, her body was never recovered, and her soul had been trapped between worlds, wandering the earth without peace. "I was lost, Joseph," Amina whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Until I met you, you made me feel alive again. But I can't stay in this world forever. The spirits of the lake want me back." Joseph was stunned. The woman he had fallen in love with, the woman he had married, was not of this world. But despite the shock, his love for Amina hadn't wavered. He was determined to find a way to keep her with him, no matter the cost. After Amina's revelation, Joseph couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, haunted by the knowledge that his wife was bound to the afterlife. That night, as he lay awake, a figure appeared at the foot of his bed, a ghostly apparition with hollow eyes and a voice like the wind. "Joseph," the figure whispered, "you have taken what does not belong to you. Amina's place is with us in the depths of the lake. Return her, or suffer the consequences." Terrified, Joseph sat up, but the figure had vanished. He was left trembling in the darkness, unsure of what to do. The spirits were growing impatient, and he knew that his time with Amina was running out. But how could he let her go? His heart ached at the thought of losing her. There had to be another way, some way to break the curse that bound her to the lake. Desperate for answers, Joseph sought out the village elders. They were the keepers of ancient knowledge and might know how to deal with the restless spirits of the lake. He met with the oldest elder, an enigmatic man named Babu Mwinyi, who had lived in the village for as long as anyone could remember. When Joseph told him of Amina's ghostly nature and the spirit's warnings, Babu Mwinyi nodded gravely. "You have married a woman from the other side," the elder said, his voice deep and foreboding. "The spirits of the lake are powerful, and they do not forgive easily. But there is a way, though it is dangerous. You must perform a cleansing ritual at the lake under the full moon. Only then can Amina's soul be freed, or she will take you with her when the spirits come for her." Joseph listened intently, realizing that this ritual might be his only hope. As the night of the full moon approached, Joseph prepared for the ritual with a heavy heart. Amina had become his whole world, and the thought of losing her filled him with dread. Yet he knew that if he did nothing, the spirits would claim them both. He gathered the necessary items, a white cloth, offerings of fruit and flowers, and a bowl of water from the lake, and set off with Amina towards the water's edge. Amina was silent as they walked, her once lively eyes now filled with sadness. "I wish things could have been different," she whispered, "but I'm grateful for the time we had together." Joseph couldn't bear to think that this might be their last night. As they reached the lake, the moon rose high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the water. The time had come for the ritual, and Joseph's heart pounded in his chest. With trembling hands, Joseph laid out the white cloth by the lake shore, placing the offerings carefully atop it. Amina stood beside him, her face pale in the moonlight. Babu Mwinyi had instructed him on the steps of the ritual, but now, standing at the edge of the lake, Joseph felt the weight of what was to come. He knelt and dipped his hands into the bowl of water, murmuring the ancient incantation the elder had taught him. The words felt foreign on his tongue, but he spoke them with conviction, praying they would be enough. As the last syllable left his lips, the air around them grew still. The wind stopped, and the water of the lake became eerily calm. Amina closed her eyes, her hands clasped tightly together as she prepared for whatever fate awaited her. The silence was short-lived. Moments after Joseph finished the ritual, the lake began to stir. The surface of the water rippled and mist rose from its depths, swirling around them. From the centre of the lake, ghostly figures began to emerge, spirits with hollow eyes and twisted forms. They hovered over the water, their voices echoing like whispers in the wind. "Amina," they called, "your time has come." Joseph's heart raced as he watched the spirits draw closer, their spectral forms flickering in the moonlight. Amina stepped forward, her face calm but her eyes filled with sorrow. "I must go," she said softly, her voice barely audible. Joseph grabbed her hand, refusing to let her go. "No," he whispered, "there has to be another way." But the spirits were relentless. They surrounded Amina, pulling her towards the water's edge. Joseph's grip tightened on Amina's hand, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't let her go, not like this. The spirits were growing more forceful, their ethereal hands reaching out to pull Amina away from him. "She doesn't belong to you," Joseph shouted, his voice filled with desperation. The spirits only laughed, their hollow voices echoing across the water. Amina's gaze met his, filled with both love and resignation. "Joseph, you have to let me go," she whispered. But he couldn't. He wouldn't. With every ounce of strength he had, Joseph fought against the spirit's pull, but it was like trying to hold back a river. Amina's form was becoming less solid, her figure flickering as if she was fading from this world. As the struggle continued, Joseph realized that he was not just fighting the spirits, he was fighting fate itself. Amina's fate had been sealed long before they met, and no matter how much he loved her, he couldn't change the fact that she didn't belong in the world of the living. His heart shattered at the realization. With tears streaming down his face, Joseph loosened his grip on Amina's hand. "I love you," he whispered, his voice breaking. Amina smiled sadly, her form growing fainter by the second. "I love you too, Joseph, but this is goodbye." With that, she slipped from his grasp, her body dissolving into mist as the spirits of the lake enveloped her. Within moments she was gone, taken back to the afterlife where she belonged. The days following Amina's departure were a blur of grief for Joseph. His home, once filled with love and warmth, now felt cold and empty. He couldn't shake the memory of her smile, her laugh, or the way she had made him feel alive in a way no one else ever had. Though he knew the truth now that Amina had been a ghost, a spirit bound to the lake, his love for her hadn't diminished. Every night he would walk to the lake shore, hoping to catch a glimpse of her reflection in the water, but she was gone. The spirits had taken her, and there was nothing he could do to bring her back. Grief weighed heavily on his heart, but he knew that he had made the right choice. Amina had been freed from the curse that had bound her to this world. But even in the knowledge of doing what was right, the loneliness was unbearable. Weeks passed, and Joseph began to feel the weight of Amina's absence in every aspect of his life. The once vibrant colours of the village seemed muted, and the laughter of the villagers felt distant, as if it were coming from another world. One night, as Joseph lay in bed, he heard something that chilled him to the bone. The whispers had returned. At first he thought it was his imagination, the echo of his grief playing tricks on him. But as the whispers grew louder, more distinct, he realized they were real. The same eerie voices that had plagued him in the early days of his marriage to Amina were now filling the room once again. "Amina," they whispered, "Amina." Joseph sat up, his heart racing. He had thought the spirits had left him alone after Amina was taken back to the lake, but now it seemed they had returned, and they were calling her name. The whispers persisted, growing louder with each passing night. Joseph's sleep became restless, his mind filled with strange dreams and unsettling visions. In one dream he stood by the lake shore, the water shimmering under the moonlight. From the depths, Amina emerged, her face pale and sorrowful. She reached out to him, her eyes pleading for help. "Joseph," she whispered, "I'm not free yet. They still have me." When Joseph awoke, the dream lingered in his mind like a dark cloud. Could it be true? Had the spirits not released Amina as he had believed? The thought sent a chill down his spine. He had done everything the elders had instructed, yet something seemed unfinished. Determined to uncover the truth, Joseph decided to return to Babu Mwinyi. If anyone knew what was happening, it would be the village elder. Joseph approached the elder's hut with a heavy heart, unsure of what he would hear. Babu Mwinyi greeted him with a knowing look, as if he had been expecting him. "The spirits are restless again, aren't they?" the elder said, before Joseph could even speak. Joseph nodded, his voice faltering as he explained the strange dreams and whispers that had returned. Babu Mwinyi sighed deeply. "The ritual you performed was only part of the solution. Amina's spirit was bound not just to the lake, but to the life she was supposed to have. The spirits claimed her, yes, but her soul still lingers, trapped between this world and the next. To truly free her, you must confront the lake spirits one final time." Joseph's heart sank. He had barely survived the last encounter with the spirits, and the thought of facing them again filled him with dread. But if it was the only way to free Amina, he knew he had no choice. Babu Mwinyi instructed Joseph on what needed to be done, a final, more dangerous ritual that would require him to enter the lake itself, to journey into the spirit realm and confront the beings that held Amina captive. Joseph listened intently, his mind racing with fear and uncertainty. The elder gave him a sacred talisman for protection and warned him that the journey would test not just his strength, but his soul. That night, Joseph prepared for what might be his final battle. He gathered the items he would need, offerings for the spirits, the talisman, and a small boat to take him into the lake's depths. His heart was heavy with both fear and determination. He knew that the only way to truly be at peace was to free Amina's soul, once and for all. As he set off toward the lake under the cover of darkness, the moon shining overhead, Joseph steeled himself for the challenge ahead. As Joseph's boat vanished into the lake's mist, the silence swallowed him whole. The talisman pulsed faintly in his hand, its power the only light in the dark. With every heartbeat he felt the pull of the unknown, of spirits waiting beneath the water and Amina's soul trapped beyond. He knew one thing: this journey would either set them free or consume him. Part 2, coming soon, Into the Spirit Realm.